Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rewind, the retro video game show coming to you live every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on the AWS for Games channels on YouTube and Twitch. My name is Chris Melisinos, and I'm the principal evangelist for video games here at AWS. And on today's special episode, I sit down with friend and AWS colleague Tristan Greaves, a solutions architect leader over here focusing on the games industry. And we're going to discuss the release of his very first video game, Avenger Sharks. Now, this game is a throwback to classic twin-stick arcade games like Robotron 2084, which of course is my favorite game of all time. And if anyone ever just calls it Robotron, tell them that they're wrong and tell them why. This also has a hint of Geometry Wars and kind of a Vampire Survivors feel to it. Again, another one of my favorite games the past year. But what makes this game, apart from it being so much fun to play, is the story behind the development team that helped bring it to life. Now, I don't want to spoil the story, so let's just pop on over and meet Tristan and learn all about him and his game, Avenger Sharks. Tristan, hey, buddy.
Hello. Hi, Chris.
Yay! Where are we? Oh, here we are. Let's see, we got a little bit of that going. We got a little, yay, a little bit of our air horn going there. Isn't that right, everyone? Yay. Yeah, we got all the sound effects going for you today, my man.
Oh, thank you. Loving the vibes. Even starting with the intro music, and I've even learned something. I always forget that Robotron has the 2084 after it as well.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So that's me told for the whole interview, because it will get referenced later. Spoiler alert, but I'll be sure to give it the right name.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, it's so good to have you on here. So, Tristan and I have had the opportunity to work together now for the almost 4 years now that I've been at AWS, which I can't believe how fast it's gone. Right. So Tristan works in the games kind of organization here at AWS, but you also have a background in the games industry. So why don't you share with us a little bit about your background and kind of how you came over here to AWS?
Yeah, well, how far back should I go? I could go back to when I first got turned on to games.
Let's do that first.
As a child.
All right.
As a child.
So I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple of the game industry legends questions. So what was the very first video game that you remember playing when you were a kid?
I think this is an easy one. It's also one I reference in any presentation I give at AWS whenever possible, such is my memory of it. But on the Atari 400, so there's a clue, but Star Raiders is probably the one I remember the most. That's the one that's just like I remember the most from the Atari 400 because it was space combat, use the membrane keyboard of the Atari 400 to do all the options. Yeah, that's the one that's just most memorable from that time. That is the first game.
And look, having a proper Atari computer meant that you didn't have to have that little keypad, the Atari 2600, that we had to plug in and play that version of Star Raiders. But yeah, the 400, 800 version, absolutely awesome. Absolutely awesome. Oh, we also have somebody here on Twitch saying their first one was Super Mario. So, all right. Give him a little bonus sound for that one. Yay, and thanks for joining the live stream there. So, all right, then the first computer you must have had at home was a 400, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. And you probably learned then to program through what, like Byte Magazine or things like that?
Well, so programming, and this is where the home computers were so good. The Atari 400 came with a big slab of a yellowing page manual, which is like, here's how to program. And it had exciting programs like, here's how to compute compound interest. So that was kind of like, those are the type of typing magazines. But it also had like a really good, if you're looking back now, it's one of the first multimedia programming tutorials. Because it played off tape, it loaded up all the animation, but then it spooled the tape where it had like an American voice actually on the tape saying, welcome to your Atari 400 computer. Here's how you do all these things. So that was awesome. So I learned a bit about programming from that, but not a huge amount because if we fast forward to my next computer, that was when I kind of really was old enough to start doing more than just type-ins, which was, of course, I'll say of course, but perhaps it's with a Commodore 64.
Oh, yeah. The mighty Commodore 64.
which was super mighty. And that's when I did, obviously played lots of games, but also started programming in BASIC, basically making clones of games from the BBC Micro we had at school that I wish I'd got, and therefore just made copies of the games that we had at school. So that was fun too.
Oh yes, copies of the games you had in school, which were permissible, right? Copies with you and all your buddies. Right, of course, exactly. Of course.
Inspired by, which I guess, further on that was sort of explain a lot. But then, I guess fast forward, we then go to machines like the Commodore Amiga, where I did more games from, wrote my own games as well, just like simple things. And then we kind of we start getting to when it was my commercial experience. It was it's when I started working for ICL, now Fujitsu, and I got the real opportunity to just by luck, I think, to work on the Sega Dreamcast project.
The mighty Sega Dreamcast. Incredible. Broke so much ground, in the games industry. Just absolutely amazing. Yeah. Very cool. So then, all right. So, I mean, so after the Dreamcast, did you stay in games? Did you start, where did your professional career lead you? And then how did you get over here to AWS, focusing back on the games industry?
Yeah. So then professionally, I guess I just fell out of games and all got very professional. And after graduating, went to basically worked in the recruitment industry online, as in doing websites for recruitment companies. Worked for a very large company, ultimately called Stepstone. My professional journey was one of development, and then going into leading teams, and then doing architecture. And then, Chris, you may remember this thing called the cloud appeared. And
yes. Yeah, wait, it's not the cloud, right? It's just computers on the network. Why is everyone calling it the cloud? If you remember who a very famous and influential figure in the computer industry actually said that, and we were all like, yeah, okay.
But I was really privileged to get to work on large scale migrations of the cloud, of our stuff to the cloud, and in this case AWS, which is great. Did loads of stuff globally with AWS, and then I started hearing the comment a lot of, well, if you like AWS so much, why don't you go work there? So I did, and I joined AWS.
That's the equivalent of well, if you like it so much, why don't you marry him?
Yeah, it is very much
that schoolyard ding,
It was one step away, Chris. And it's like, I joined originally as a CSM, which is our customer solutions manager. So that's people that work with typically large enterprises and helping them do all the cloud transformation stuff. But very early on, two things happened. One, I discovered that AWS had a whole games function, that we were doing stuff. We had our own game services. We were doing stuff with very large games customers, very large customers, medium-sized customers, and small customers. So all that was great. And I discovered that there was a route to get closer back to my more technical background of building stuff, because we're full of builders, but I wanted to get back to that. And I managed to interview to become a solutions architect back in the games team. And then, fast forward to leading that team in the UK now, covering all of our games customers, which is obviously super exciting because I get to work with games customers as my day job now.
Yeah, as do I, which I love. And you have worked with some of the biggest, right, games companies as well. So I love, though, that for so many of us that grew up in that era, right, of first home computers coming in, it was video games that really fostered a love of the mystery behind these machines. Like, what can it do? Like, how do I type in this code that you can kind of follow along with it, but not sure exactly what everything does here. And then it's putting graphics on the screen and it's making noises, it's doing all these things, right? It was games, and it was the accessibility of systems of that era, which Commodore and Atari both had the greatest instruction manuals that came with those machines, right? It's like, here's your first program, which was always, the Hello World program, or Tristan is awesome. And if I put a semicolon there, it's going to fill the screen sideways with it. All the way to learning about, tone generation and learning to do sprites and things of that nature. And so it's just, I think if you're in an era where that was so instrumental and fundamental to your childhood, you kind of can't get away from video games. And now today, of course, you know, the youngest generation are coming into the world connected, and video games are the principal language that they speak, right? From an entertainment and engagement perspective. So it is the right time. Well, it's always the right time to be in games, but even more so now, you know, video games just continue to capture the attention, imagination of more and more people. And it's awesome that we get to focus on that here at AWS. Yes? No?
Yes.
Maybe so?
No,
All
yes.
right, good.
No, yes. I think I was waiting for a sound effect. Just there
you go. Here we go. Yes.
That's right on cue. No, it's great. And yeah, you reminded me of my time just on the Amiga where, yeah, so I started creating some games on the Amiga, like principally, but I always liked the fact that the tools were there to sort of make it, like you say, do the stuff like put sprites on the screen and do graphics and basic music. And there were graphics packages like Deluxe Paint to do drawings of all very rudimentary for me, because I'm not really an artist or a musician.
Yeah.
In computer terms, although I played a guitar in real life. Yeah, to create my own games, but it's all very casual back then. And then of course I joined AWS and was like working with our customers all the time in creating games. And then it's kind of like, it's like a mini segue here, which is like all about, but then I started thinking that I hadn't actually created my own games for quite a while. Yes. But here I was surrounded by talent everywhere, like both internally, obviously outside with some of the games our customers create all the time, and surrounded by a wealth of tools. In fact, the standard quote I use really nowadays is, it's never been easier ever to create a game, but equally it's never been harder to be successful, because every single day dozens if not hundreds of new games are released, either free or commercially. So truly an exciting time to learn this stuff and release and get your creativity, your urges satisfied.
But you are exactly right too. There has never been a better time than right now to be in the games industry. I mean, we've got tools that are basically free. We have connectivity at the lowest cost, but the highest throughput that we've ever had. We have access to more information in communities than we ever dreamed about having before. And you can find people all over the world that want to go ahead and make games together. But you didn't have to go all over the world. You only had to look inside of the four walls of your house. So why don't you tell us about Avenger Sharks, how it came into being, and tell us who your dev team is.
Yeah, the dev team. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And what I liked here, and as a precursor, and I think what comes into the start of the game, with the games industry, there's always been this perception that over time, games have to be bigger. They have to have better graphics.
Right.
They have to have more music. The production values have to. I don't know how many A's we're up to now, Chris. Maybe it's 5 A's, quadruple A. And we see that. But what I really like recently is that we have seen this resurgence, or maybe it never went away, of more retro style, simple games that are selling and being extremely successful. I mean, the most recent one over the last few days, there's a game about clicking on a banana called Banana, which is topping the Steam chart as one example. So inspired by that. So the story is, like I said, the starter was, we have a leadership principle at Amazon about learn and be curious. And I wanted to create a new game. I wanted to learn the fact there's all these modern day engines, so Unity, Unreal, and so on. So how do I learn this stuff? And I've got a bit of a flaw when it comes to learning, which is like, okay, great. I want to learn this new tech, but I have to apply myself to like building a thing. And that's when I'll sometimes get stuck. It's like, I've got to build a thing. How do I build it? So I want to build a game. So first of all, okay, let's do the easy part. Let's choose an engine. And I played a bit of Unreal, played a bit of Unity, which are obviously extremely capable, amazing engines. But I was kind of already having a bit of a throwback to my Amiga days of where's the engine? It's like a one-click executable that takes up hardly any footprint. It's really simple. Ideally with a programming language a bit like Python, which is like I found it in Godot. So that's the engine I went for. Because it literally is, you download an executable, put it on any machine, bang, you're away. And then I followed the tutorial because, okay, let's follow the tutorial. And I ended up with a very simple game, which is, or if you can call it that, of just a sprite moving around, eating other sprites or dodging other sprites. And that's the basics. But then, of course, my lack of imagination here. So I don't know what to do next. Like, what game am I gonna do? Where am I gonna take this? And that's when the dev team comes in. So what better dev team do you need than a 4 and a 6-year-old? And I asked them, and I think my son just said, "Daddy, it's like, why don't you have it where there's a shark that eats people?" Perfect. So that was the start. I literally got a shark sprite. There's loads of open source assets that just went around a screen and just ate things. And then the ideas kept coming, really. And then it's like, can the shark shoot things? And obviously, yes, in a child-friendly way, the shark sprays water at people. And that was the start. It just built from then, with like children being the principal game designers and credited as such.
I love that. I love that. Okay, but now tell us, how did the story evolve? Did it start with, okay, you said shark to eat things, like how did you start building kind of like, if not exactly a development Bible, but a development Bible? Like, how did the idea start to come about? And what was it like? Like, did the rest of the family kind of want to get involved? Like, tell us a bit about that journey, building this with your kids.
Yeah, no, well, and it definitely became a collaborative effort. Perhaps, obviously, I didn't have a 4 and a 6-year-old knuckling down doing all the Python programming, but no, they came out with great ideas about like some of the superpowers, like the power ups that you can get in the shark. The shark's called Bruce, by the way, so bonus points if you spot the shark-based reference. And so all the power-ups came from there, different types of enemies, and they were just like, keep making suggestions, but mixed with my own love of retro. So every enemy in the game has its own AI, which is inspired from Pac-Man. Like, as in, some chase you, some try and run away, some move randomly, and it's just like those little touches. And in the same way that I needed an origin story for the story, and that
every hero needs an origin story, for sure.
Right. Because my children, I can't remember where it came from. I'm sure there's no trademarks being violated, but it's called Avenger Shark. So as a shark, you must be avenging something. So what is it? What are you avenging in this game? So they kind of contribute to the story, and that inspired me again to create like the intro sequence, because there's actually a point to the game. And yeah, those are the basics of the design by committee, Chris.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And as we get in and start to play it, as I'm playing through, we're going to talk about what are some of the choices that you made and the trade-offs you did. And I want to know more about the engine. I want to know more about what the journey was like when you were putting this up on Steam. So it is available to anybody that wants to go ahead and download it for free on Steam. And I'm just making sure that our feed is looking good, and it is. So we're good to go. So why don't we go ahead and jump on over to the 8-Bit Living Room, and let's talk more about Avenger Shark. So let's go. All right, so here we are. Look, we've got you little Avenger Sharks right there in our window up top there for you. And what I'm going to do is we are going to go ahead and pop over to our browser, and here we go. We've got Avenger Sharks up on the Steam storefront right here, which is awesome. So you can, again, go to steampowered.com, and if you don't have Steam, download it and start using it. You can download and play Avenger Sharks here. We see that was published on the 21st of this month. And yeah, why don't you tell us a bit about again, the process, like how did you decide where you were going to publish it? Not that we have a tremendous amount of online PC storefronts, but tell us a bit about that part of your journey here.
Yeah, I mean, I think over time I wanted to make it more visible so that people could play this game. It's starting to, and also to help give us direction, and also because bless him, my son in particular was like saying, "Daddy, I can't believe you're going to be famous having created Avenger Sharks." So his optimism was great. So that meant I had to publish it. So initially, in like the pre-launch stage, put it on itch.io. But then I decided really that I really wanted to publish a game on Steam. Like, I'd grown up with Steam back in the days when Half-Life 2 was released and Steam came into being, and before it became the storefront it is now. So I paid my $100 as an incentive to get the game listed. And it's good because it helped me bring me a bit closer to what it means to publish a game, really, because of the demands that the storefronts have, right? So with Steam, you have to like you have on the screen now, you have to produce all these assets. So you have to have all these different logos in different sizes, sample screenshots, all this other information. Well, I had to reteach myself Photoshop. It had been a while to generate versions of the logos of all the sizes to pass and pass all the testing to be certified for publishing. So that was just a great experience, and that's what kind of also made it feel more tangible, and it encouraged me to get the game into a release state that would run, because from day one I wanted it to run on Windows, on Linux, on Mac, and therefore Steam Deck as well. And
which, by the way, we found out that you just passed the verification check today, right?
Yeah, that was no, that's good. That's kind of and it's crowdsourced. So if you're a little indie developer like me, then it's just down to time and enough people playing the game on Steam Deck to get the certification through, which happened today. It was a nice surprise to come through this morning. And
which should also be, I mean, that's got to make you feel good too, that enough people are playing and playing on Steam Deck that it became verified, right? So you have people out there playing your game, man. Your kids' games.
It is literally amazing. So I know it is really thrilling to actually get a game out there that's being played, and people have made suggestions as well. So, for example, it didn't have achievements at launch, but I had a literal demand from a friend to say, I want achievements, because they like achievements in games. So I learned the Steam API with Godot to put achievements in, and there they are. So it's all there available for people now.
Well, very cool. Well, what I also want to jump into before we fire up the game and start playing through some of it is, I had a chance to go down and look at the reviews of your game, and for the ones that are there, they're all positive, right? Although, so I have my positive filter on. But, the ones that are in there, I mean, Vampire Survivors, right there, fun game to pick up and play. Which is the one that was down here? Well met, weary traveler, as we embark.
There'll be one you won't agree with, because I seem to remember, because obviously I read my own press as much as possible, but someone did say this is better than Robotron 2084. I know.
Okay, so we are nothing if not the choices and memories that have built us, right? So, yes, if that person has grown this hair, perfectly acceptable response. I love the game. That's a tall order there, but I did see somebody here say it's better than most Ubisoft games, so I thought that was an interesting post there. Here you go. Avenger Sharks blows away old school Robotron. Avenger Sharks has full control of support, which works flawlessly, and it does. Modern gamers will define Avenger Sharks as a roguelite because you can power up your shark, which is cool. Avenger Sharks is also free. For that price, Avenger Sharks is a 10 out of 10. That's right.
So happy. I think also what I learned from I can't remember, it's probably down there somewhere, but there's people that do reviews in the themes. I think there's one review in there where someone is role playing as a crow.
Yes.
And reviewing the game. And that's the thing. They go around and they review lots of games, role playing as a crow that likes games.
Yeah, I think it was annoying crow. Have you folks ever played Tormentor times Punisher? Caw caw. So he finishes every sentence with caw caw, and everything is in all caps all the time. God bless the Street Sharks having their own free-to-play game on Steam, caw caw. So I love it. Well, go ahead.
And it's just really great with just the engagement, really. The fact that, and some of the little things that I thought, I'm just going to put in because they were games from my childhood, like having a score and having a high score. And someone saying, that was great because I love playing the game with my brother and we can try and beat each other's high scores. And I was almost thinking, I didn't even realize it as a thing anymore. But it's great that it is.
And they certainly are. Well, why not go and fire it up? I'm going to start playing through it and then talk to us about what it was like developing in Godot, other ones that you looked at, maybe some tips or tricks as I'm playing through it. So I'm going to try to talk, help carry on this conversation, and play the game all at the same time. So let's go ahead and fire up Avenger Sharks. So here we go. let's see. We should start firing it up here. Here we go for Jack and Amelia. Yay, Jack and Amelia. One day in the reef of serendipity.
With bonus developers commentary. I like it. So yeah, so this is the origin story. So,
that's right. Now talk to us about how you picked the music and where you got the music from and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I can't remember the exact site, but there are a few different open source or rather like free distributable license sites. So basically one of those. So best way to find out is in the credits in the main game. So everyone is fully credited, of course, and it's all licensed. But so yeah, that was an inspiration was to create an underwater landscape and to create the tension, the dramatic tension that this was a shark that needed vengeance. And of course, a little bit of a switcheroo here because here the fish are Bruce's friends. He didn't eat the fish; he wants to save the fish. As part of everything being a bit different. So yes, that was the basic inspiration for this, and that's all in Godot. So yeah, the fish are a scene. So yeah, a bit of developer stuff. So in Godot, the whole construct is you have scenes, and a scene can be anything really. A scene could be the player. The scene could be a fish. The scene could be a power up, and then everything's grouped together and instantiated. So yeah, that's the starting point. But I'll talk about some of the little bits as you play. I see you're adjusting volume at the moment, but that's fine.
I'm just making sure that I adjust the mix down. So let's let the music play for a moment. I love this, by the way. This just reminds me of movies from that 80s era that would play in the background.
That was the vibe. I mean, I guess, yeah, just maybe slightly before my active arcade playing time. Maybe now is a good point to talk about inspiration, I guess.
Yeah.
Because, like, yes, I mean, this is a twin stick shooter game, right? You mentioned Robotron, but Robotron 2084.
Robotron 2084, excellent,
exactly.
Excellent.
But it wasn't my inspiration, and that's because, and I thought about this when you mentioned that. I thought back to my arcade games, or which games do I remember playing when arcades were still a thing. I went to arcades and I played games. And for me, the sorts of games were Double Dragon, my favourite game. As a young boy, it involved hitting things, and that's good. Operation Wolf, Outrun, those are the sorts of games. I literally don't remember Robotron 2084, but do you remember twin stick shooters? But my first one was on the Amiga, and that was Llamatron.
Yeah, Jeff Minter, right?
Yes,
the Mighty Yak.
The Mighty Yak, absolute genius. So at the time, I thought that, that was an original thing. Llamatron was like, hey, this is great. I've never seen this in a game before. And it's only nowadays I realise, Llamatron is based off Robotron 2084. So that was the inspiration to make it a twin stick shooter. Which was
very cool. Very cool. All right, I'm going to turn the volume of the game down a little bit so I can hear you as we go ahead and play. And as we jump in and start playing, let's talk about it. So Llamatron, right? Which, again, Jeff Minter, Robotron inspired game. And I do remember playing that on the Amiga as well later, right? So, all right, we're jumping straight in to the gameplay here. So why don't you help us understand, what is going on in this scene here. So,
well, in your quest for vengeance, and this has gone through a few iterations in terms of the gameplay loop. So, a bit of a history. So you've got to destroy all the enemies. That's obvious. And in the version of the game we're playing now, the waves are timed. They go through to the first wave. Because I felt that just made it a bit more fun. Whereas in the previous versions, waves it's down to how many enemies you had to kill. Hit with your water blast. Remember, this is child friendly here. To defeat your enemies to give up, but a certain number of them, and that's how the gameplay loop worked. But I found I just switched it to time based just to try and. There's one thing I've learned from this whole experience: is game balancing is incredibly hard.
Yeah.
Because I'll go through stages of adding all this stuff, adding power-ups, adding new enemies, changing how many hits enemies take, all the rest of it, and then either becomes too easy because you can cheese it with power-ups, which are now out now, or it becomes too hard. So yeah, the gameplay loop was interesting. So what you're seeing is just the first wave there. Oh, you've given up already, Chris?
No, I'm not giving up. I'm adjusting audio so that way I can hear you, pump up the volume, pump up the volume, and not blow my ears out in my studio monitors. So there we go.
There we go. Got it?
Yes. All right, good. All right. So please continue.
Yeah, so 30 seconds. So what can we see? So yeah, and so earlier on, like I said, so one of the first things I added was that fish are your friends. So that's why you can collect the fish. And if you get enough of them, then your power-up bar will increase. Go on, Chris.
Now, your power-up bar is the green or the pink bar?
It's frenzy ready. So I don't know what you're playing with. If you hit your trigger button, right trigger by default, yes. Fish frenzy.
Oh shoot, I want to grab that before. Oh, that was the one thing that also when I was playing, it's like, oh no, let me grab those pieces before I get sucked out of the room. Yeah. And sometimes you make it, sometimes you don't.
And then because again, this is the roguelike thing. So then I wanted the ability to power up your shark, power up Bruce. And I went through a few iterations of this as well. So the initial version I started with, and again, this is a great example of you have an idea that you think is going to be fun, but then it's not. So initially the power-up system was similar to I think R-Type, those sorts of shooters, where as you collect power-ups, it just the power-up you could select moved on by one. And you had a bar, and when you say if you collected 5 power-ups, it moved the bar along 5 times, and then you could select the thing selected, like laser or orbital, whatever it was. And Project X and Amiga used that. I thought that was really cool. So I spent a lot of time implementing that. Like you collect the things, it moves the bar, you select the thing, and then I realised this isn't fun because as a player, you're now concentrating on this bar and moving it along, and it takes ages to get a power up, by which time you might have already lost the game, and you're concentrating too much on this little bar and not what's happening on screen. It's meant to be frenetic. So I went with more of a simple, you know what, you just pick up a power up and it's random.
Right.
So move to that. Oh, sorry, there's 2 types of power-ups, I forgot. So that's power-ups, but then upgrades were added as well because I wanted to add like, okay, so between waves you can make choices now about how you want to make the game easier as you go, which is where you are now. So yeah, make your choice.
Okay, so let me ask you, what would you pick?
I didn't see how well you did on the last. Oh, heal me, I think. Because I think you were.
Yeah, I actually, while testing before, I was like, yeah, heal me. That's always seems to be the good. Now, again, what are the 2 different colored bars? The green versus the pink?
Yeah. So green. I think green is health. So you're fully healed at the moment, and pink is your fish power-up bar, your fish frenzy. So a few more fish. Oh. There you go, frenzy ready, right trigger, bang.
There we go. All right, yeah, so basically your smart bomb is the fish frenzy.
Yeah, as long as, whatever the properly
whatever vernacular you grew up with.
Yeah, and one you just picked up the gold star, which is in no way related to any games that feature gold stars. If you,
I don't play the Nintendo chimes here, but I got you. We got
it because we're good. That makes all the enemies scared of you, and you then go on a feeding frenzy. So then I added that little red particle effect, so it looks like you've just got a bloodlust. I guess becomes slightly less kid friendly as time has gone on with this game, to be fair. And it's just adding those features because I thought it would be fun to have and just make things a bit more interesting. They go 40 seconds now.
Yeah, so I do love, so I mentioned, at the opening of the show here that taking some inspiration from similar other games, right? So cheating death at the 50%, I'm like, yeah, that right there is one of the staples if you're a Vampire Survivor player. Tell me the origin. Okay, so this is. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to stop. I was talking and took my hand.
No, that's fine. But you reminded. But just because you collected a few, I guess one of the very first. In fact, I haven't even mentioned it so far. Very recently, child features was like, and this came from my daughter, Amelia, because we didn't want Jack to have all the fun. So he'd brought down his cuddly shark, saying, "I want to have a shark that eats people." And shortly after that, my daughter Amelia, she waved around a cuddly dinosaur saying she wants to have a dinosaur in the game that helps you. So that's why there is a dinosaur in the game. And if you collect the dinosaur then goes and chases after everyone, basically. And is your friend. The dinosaur is your friend. The fish are your friend. And this is why it's great having children design games. I wouldn't have come up with this. I wouldn't have thought of a shark who has fish as friends and is a dinosaur that rampages and helps you, right?
Well, I mean, there were dinosaurs that did roam the ocean and still do, if we're gonna grab a megalodon. It doesn't need to make literal. It doesn't need to make actual sense. It just needs to be fun, right?
Exactly, and get more difficult as over time. So, which is the idea, because that's certain. So. There's basically an AI in the game, and AI is perhaps doing a bit of heavy lifting here. And there's AI in two ways. So as you can see, the different enemies act in different ways. So the knights are always chasing you. The wizards are a bit more random, and there's some other ones. If you survive long enough, Chris, you will see them. They all act differently, and they're all configured differently.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, your enemies do act differently, much like the original, Robotron 2084. They all, well, most games, right? That are like this, right? Different class of characters have behaviors, right? But did you do the interactions with each different group of enemies on the screen? Do they act the same against other types as they do with themselves, or can you talk a little bit about the kind of the AI loop that you put through? And of course, when we're talking about AI, we're not talking about Gen AI stuff, right? Which is unfortunate because AI has been part of game development since we created computers, right? So now we have to also clarify, no, this isn't Gen AI reaching out. We're not using Bedrock or anything here. Talk to me a bit about the behavior modeling that you did for the different characters.
Yeah, no, thank you. So it starts with the fact that there's different AI modes that any enemy can have in this game, and every single enemy you can see is its own. It's running its own thread. It's spawned and then just goes off on its merry way. So, and then for each one, it's configured what type of AI model it has. So, for example, the knights have a chase model, so they will every X amount of time reorient and try and chase you. And this is the great thing again about game dev. I learned so much because under the hood here, this is running in Godot. This is a 2D physics engine, so this is all using physics. So as you're firing here, that's using inertia, so that those just keep going until they hit something, for example. But there's no gravity in this game, so it's going in a straight line. And the same for the enemies as they move around. They're trying to chase you, but they're also impacted by physics. So they will bounce off you, and they will bounce off walls. And then that inspired me to try and again, it's a real rabbit hole, Chris. It's like you go down this and you fix things. Because then I found out there's that thing where I was relying on the physics for the enemies to navigate around walls, which sometimes works because they sort of slide around the wall if you're in the right place. But you could have it if you're at a perfect angle, the enemy will just get stuck, right? They just sit on the wall and they can't get to you. And so I looked into pathfinding. So now this uses Godot's pathfinding features, so that all the time the enemies are just computing the best path to get to you. Now most of the time that looks fairly simple, they just go in a straight line. But if you are trying to be tricky and go around the walls to hide, then they will get you without just getting stuck. So it's a learning experience. That's part of the AI model.
Yeah, and I mean, and that is part of, when we talk about the importance of people, not even the importance. When we talk about that games are made by people, right? Mechanics and understanding how things work so they don't break is one thing. But if it's not fun, it doesn't matter if stuff doesn't break, right? And that is the refinement of the gameplay loop that is so critical to a game being fun, right? And your game has that, you can see that refinement in there. Can you talk a bit about the process that you all went through in terms of game balance and some changes that you had to make?
Yeah, it's some great thoughts with that. So I think I already mentioned how, just in terms of general funness, I changed it to be like a time-based approach. So that each wave, you have to survive longer each wave. So just to try and have that one more go approach. Like if it gets harder each time, you want to try again. You want to make it easy to do that. So that was part of the refinement model. The other part was, so for any given release, right? So I made a few different releases of this game, from like the pre-alphas to exit, to the full release, and a few changes since then. I basically first development wave, like when I first start a new version, I start my change log for that new version, I'll just throw features in. Like, I want to add this, I want to add this. I don't care about game balance at this point. I really am just throwing in power-ups, I'm throwing in enemies, making changes. But then I would just deliberately do a balance pass, where all I'm doing is thinking, how do I keep this fun now? Like there are certain enemies I added which were just too hard. And as soon as they appeared, it would just suck the fun out of the game because it's just too hard and you get overwhelmed really quickly. It's not subtle. There's a lot of tweaking of how many enemies there are. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. So during any given wave, it's how many enemies spawn at a time. How often do they spawn? So these are all configurable things that I had to tweak. How often do they spawn? What different types appear in a wave? What are the patterns they appear in? Like you may notice sometimes they appear surrounding you, sometimes they're random, sometimes they appear on the left of the arena and run to the right, and a whole combination of all these things will happen. And that is all it's all in a text file and all gets configured. And so that was a lot of time spent balance parsing. So it's balance parsing, but then I also spent a lot of time removing stuff that I put in that I thought would be technically cool. An example of that, I had it that when you complete a wave, like you just did, that's amazing timing, Chris. It's like perfectly in sync there. It would do a camera effect because this is a 2D engine under the hood. I could just do a zoom in, and it would do a zoom in on the player as you kind of went to the door, and then zoom out again as you went into the next wave. So a really cool, like you see in some of those classic Nintendo games where you go into a different zone, it pixelates.
Yeah, well, like Super Mario World, and you'd go into the door, and the camera would close around you and then open back out, right? An iris, little iris transition there.
Oh, iris! See, you're showing your video skills. So yes, an iris transition. Then I realised that, so I put that in, and it would zoom in and zoom out again as you're moving into the next arena. And I don't suffer from motion sickness. But it gave me motion sickness, and I realised that this wasn't a good feature to put in. It made it all feel a bit weird, so the feel was wrong. So technically I was thinking this will add pizzazz, this will add something that makes the game look, I guess, more technical than it is in some ways. But right. I took it out. It never got released because it would not have been a good experience, I think.
Well, not having all of the nausea-inducing moments is probably a good... That's a good a healthy perspective to take. That's not too bad of a score, right? 1.2 million.
I can't remember. You're not using the cheat mode. I don't think the cheat mode's in there. I'll put it in for my son so he can play this game with like and just forever, because there's an internal cheat mode. And another technical one, by the way, before I forget, that I put in that slightly took out, where I had a lot more lighting effects, because I thought I've got a 2D game. Godot has lighting effects. Let's add more lighting effects. Let's add all the lighting effects. So every single particle had particle effects and lighting effects. So all the different shots from the enemies and from yourself would light up the scene.
Right.
But performance suffered, right? It's something that made it so that the game, when lots of stuff appeared on screen on lesser powered systems, it just wouldn't run very well. Like frame rate would drop. So I took those out, and as I realised that FPS is the important thing, and just replaced them with kind of faked it with lighting sprites. So the glow that you see around particles now that's not lighting. That's just like fancy particles that look a bit like lighting. But there's no shadows being cast. The only shadows are from the based around the walls. So yeah, it's a real adventure and it's learning new stuff. Like every day is a school day, and I definitely found that with creating this game over time.
Very cool. Sorry about that. I had to turn this down just a little more. I mean, people that are watching this and that will be watching are going to hear those bombastic sounds. Right? So, all right, tell me. So a couple of things here too. I noticed. Tell me about the different modes: pacifist versus arcade.
Yeah, well, I think I'm not sure which games inspired this, but I always seem to remember that certain games would have different modes and different ways of playing it. So I just decided just for fun, the fact that you can play in pacifist mode, where you're a really gentle shark. You don't just care about your fishy friends. You don't want to cause any pain. So in that mode, you don't even shoot any shark spray. You just pick up the fish.
Oh.
So that's literally inspiration. It's just an even more gentle game that doesn't involve shooting in any way.
I love that.
And yeah, and then I thought, and the one I haven't added yet, but I would probably want to put in. I think the classic mode you see in lots of games similar to this nowadays, or other ones, is like an endless mode, like this, or the chill mode, just the one where really you can play forever. And the game maybe goes on for 20 minutes and then will just end, and that's your score.
Yeah.
I should probably do that this weekend. I don't know. I need to do. I'm keen to do a new release. It's just all about time. Time.
Of course. Okay, when we talked about the gameplay, we talked about balance, we talked about the game loop, we talked about the considerations that you have to make. Let's talk about a couple of other things. First, apart from like the particle effects and that kind of stuff, what were some ideas that you tried, but then you just decided to bin it because it just wouldn't work?
I think the one I haven't put in yet, and it's not that it hasn't worked yet, it's just finding out how to make it fit. Because where I'm torn now is like what I've got. I think what I've ended up with is a very playable game, right? It is of that classic ilk of, there's deliberately no progression between games, so that when you finish this game, you start a new game, you're always at the start. It doesn't have that roguelike approach where between games you can, I don't know, have extra health or unlock things between games, and that's deliberate. So that's not something that I haven't tried, but it's not something I've done yet. But it's also something I'm not sure whether I want to add it. Like, would it actually for this game add anything, or is it enough? Is it like, if we go back to the beginning of this interview, Chris, is it like if we go back to the days of Atari 400 and games like Donkey Kong that I also played, Missile Command, Centipede.
Wait, did you just say Atari?
I did say Atari.
Oh, that Atari, yeah.
Brilliant. That Atari. And those are all games where you played, and every single time you loaded that game again, you start from zero, and it was played the same way. And so that's where the game is. So I'm at that point where, do I add in those roguelike things? So that's one.
Yeah.
So these are almost like the things I deliberately haven't chosen to add. Another one I'm thinking of adding would be, and this is the one that would cause me pain on a developer level, because it's one of these things where I guess all devs will understand that I haven't put in multiplayer support from the beginning. This has not been coded in a way that would make couch multiplayer work. Because the player, your little shark object there now, that's the player scene, but it's very much hard coded into the game that there is one player. The player has stuff, and it's very set. So to make it multiplayer, and this is a different one. This is one where I would like to add this. I think it would add an element of fun to the game, but I've already experimented the fact that at the moment the as you can see, the arena scrolls around you. You can just zoom out slightly, and you could see in the arena at all times.
Yeah,
could add it, but it'd be hard, Chris.
It'd be
really hard.
That's that old Neo Geo, thing of when you are like Samurai Showdown, when you're fighting, the sprites are really big, but the further apart you got, the more the scene backed out, and you have a dynamic camera, right? That's
exactly it. And then even harder if I wanted to add in net play, but that's on my list of things, as I would like to learn more about doing net play and keeping things in sync and everything else, because Godot has all this, so I know that it can do with it.
By the way, did you notice that? Did you see that strategic use of the feeding frenzy for the loop of them as they...
Yeah. And this is all stuff that came into how I created this game, because when I was doing things like making it So when it was in the mode where you had to defeat a certain number of enemies before triggering the next wave, then there is the problem that, okay, a player could defeat all enemies but one, and then could kite the enemy around, get loads of power-ups without any... It's too much. There was too much reward without the risk. And so that, there was lots of bouncing around about, okay, so do I make power-ups appear like on a timer? They appear randomly, which some do. So like Mr. Dinosaur, he doesn't have a better name than that. Mr. Dinosaur does appear in that way. But the actual power-ups are actually dropped by enemies. So that stops that cheesing behavior. So that was all part of the journey as well.
Very cool. All right, so now let me ask you a question. I've been asking you questions. I'm going to ask you some more questions. There is a wide variety of enemies that you wouldn't assume would be underwater. Not that they have to be. Tell us how the character creation portion of your designers played into skeletons, and it looks like knights, and it looks like tell me about the variety, and is there a backstory to the inclusion of them in Avenger Shark?
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'm glad that my palette changing of the graphics in this gave you the illusion of the game being underwater, because it is meant to be underwater in sort of an underwater labyrinth. That's the law. I should probably write a novella, Chris, like in the days we used to buy games, had little books with the backstory in. Can you imagine?
Exactly. We need a little Atari comic book to go along with it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But there was a time when that may not have been the case, and it wasn't. It was more dungeony in terms of graphics, because then the story behind the game that actually Bruce was a shark that had gone on land to attack and gain vengeance for his fishy friends, but nowadays in the water labyrinth, just to be clear. No, in terms of the inspiration for enemies, a lot of that was because I'm not an artist, so I'm not someone that is a talented 2D artist. So a lot of the assets are kind of open source or freely distributable. So I look for assets that inspired me or inspired children. So things like the knights, that's obvious. So if you think of a knight, so that's going to be the tough one, right? That one has more hit points. That one just chase after you ruthlessly. Right. The wizard will obviously fire magic bolts, because that's what wizards do. And skeletons, which I think you have there, skeletons will just split into other skeletons. That's probably inspired by reading Funny Bones to my children about skeletons that break into pieces. So I think it probably was inspired by that. So yeah, that's the kind of inspiration. And then I've decided, again, based on games that have inspired, and they just appeared as well, and that's fortuitous, like snake type enemies.
Yeah.
As one of the first games I created was obviously a clone of Tron, like the light cycle game. Of course, when on the Amiga, and I thought, let's have one of those, and therefore create a snake type creature that bounces around, and you have to destroy all the little bits of it. You're getting really good at this, by the way. So I need to put in and Steam allows this, the internet-powered leaderboards.
Oh yeah, for sure, because I'm going to continue working my way up at these. I did love, I was like, well, wait a minute, those bear traps that are underwater or in the environment, do those hurt me, or are they for them? And so I actually, running into them, I was like, oh, they hurt me apparently.
They are the trap. Oh, that's it. That's the other enemy type I didn't mention. Yes, because that's those are the rogues, and obviously rogues lay traps. You see, so maybe there's a Dungeons and Dragons style influence here as well. Actually, another one of my type of things I grew up with. Oh, so you've got the strategy down. You kept the fish frenzy for the start of the wave.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. See, that's wonderful emergent gameplay that you start to, or rather, player behavior that starts to happen when you start to learn the mechanics of the game. Love that.
And that's why I spent some time just making sure there's no way to cheese the game. Like you have to. You can do that. Yeah, there's some hard. I think the necromancers have now appeared, which are the ones that have that nice spiral attack. Because again, each enemy has different attacks, and that's their one. But But I just reminded looking at this now that you're seeing some of the little touches I did in, like quality of life, and as in to make it just look that a bit nicer. So one was the fact that when you hit enemies, there's a slight knockback and they flash a bit. That never used to be there, but just adding that in just makes it a bit more visible what's happening. Like,
yeah.
You are damaging them in the same way that if you get hit, I think the whole screen flashes red slightly. Those are the little things. Also, when you collect fish now, they used to just disappear, and you get the little yay sound effect, yay,
yeah,
that's cute. But they also fly off screen now, so when you collect them, they just like fly off to the top left of the screen. It just adds that. That's what I really enjoy, adding in those little touches that are just so simple to code. Like that's literally just saying, take this fish, your target is here, go up there very fast and disable the physics engine so that you don't bump into, so that you just fly through things.
All right, but I think an important, reminder for people that may be thinking about, doing game development is, don't frustrate yourself by thinking about every possible thing that you want to put into it. Figure out what the core gameplay loop is, what makes that fun, and work on polishing that, refining that, and getting that nailed down. Then, as you said, you start to understand, oh, well, this may benefit by adding this one additional little thing. But if you start with this whole laundry list of things that you absolutely have to have in the game and don't make any of those compromises, you'll never finish your game, or you'll be so frustrated that you're like, game development's not for me, type of thing, right?
Yeah, and that's such good advice. And that's what helped me because I had this view that I wanted people to see this game. Like I wanted Jack and Media to be able to see this game as a thing. That meant for every release, I essentially had a release schedule, right? So in every release, I wanted the game to be, whatever state it's in, it was playable. It had the thing. I never wanted it to be, it's that classic iterative development approach. Every day, I wanted the game to be playable. It's very rare that I ended a day working on this game where you couldn't fire it up and play it. It was always wanted to leave it in a state where it would just work. It might need balancing, but it would just work.
Yeah.
And that's the key thing. It's like, I knew it's going to be a twin stick shooter, and then yes, I did iterate over it. But at every point, it was a game that I could hand a controller to a child and say, "You can play that now," and then get instant feedback. And some of that feedback really helped bug test the game. Like at some points, like my son was getting like upset because he couldn't see what was happening with some of the power-ups. He's like, "Daddy, I can't see what's happening. I don't understand." And he was right, because the power-ups weren't clear enough. Like there were some of the power-ups, it wasn't obvious, or he wasn't collecting them because they didn't look like power-ups. So to his child mind, and having like, I guess the likes of you and I, we played enough games now that we've seen power-ups in a billion different forms that we kind of instinctively know them. Right. But it wasn't obvious to a child, and therefore that informed changing. I think it might have been actually the star power up. I think that was something else that turned you into that vengeance mode or whatever it is. But I thought, no, let's make it right. Let's not try and be clever. Let's just make it a big gold star. That's obviously something shiny you should collect. And so child-based, with the benefit of also that children are free testers in that regard.
Yes, it's yes, but also it is that non-obvious logic, right, that kids have, because there are no rules, right, for it. It's, oh, well, why couldn't this do X, or why couldn't that do Y? Well, yeah, really. I mean, why couldn't a shark be on land in a dungeon with wizards and knights and little bees that fly at you and bear traps and a reticle that fires down?
And I'm reminded, and this is like a completely offshoot story, but I think some of it's all about suspension of disbelief.
Yes.
Right? And therefore, because this game, and it has an intro sequence, because I thought, I'd like an intro sequence. I want a cute intro sequence. And it has an intro sequence, and it establishes the fact that there's a shark and there are fish. So that's believable, because you have a shark and you have fish. And then an evil thing appears and takes away all the fish. So that's kind of credible that could happen, and therefore you want to rescue the fish, and it kind of sets up the game in a way that doesn't sound outlandish. But the story I'm thinking of is I recently had the pleasure of watching, you haven't seen it, so I recommended it. It's RoboDoc, which is a documentary about the making of the film RoboCop. It's like a 4-part documentary, and it's amazing. But one of the stories they tell is the fact that actually, if in the film you just said, here's RoboCop, and he walked around all clunkily, like RoboCop does, bzz, 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 actually, that would look a bit stupid, and people might laugh at it. But in the film is that they introduce RoboCop very slowly, like they do the thing where it's point of view footage, and then they have him shown like on a TV monitor that happens to be watching him move. Then they show him through like stained glass appearing, and the reaction of everyone is like, "Ooh, what's this?" And so when they suddenly show RoboCop, it's credible because they've built up and moved slowly to it. And that's why with video games, you can have a game with a shark with spraying water to defeat wizards and rogues and traps and power-ups. And that's completely credible and completely normal, especially to a child. It's just why not? Why not have all the things?
I love it. And I had a pretty good run going here. That wasn't too bad. That was, and I've got some... I've got my vengeance tenfold, and I got a couple of... I had a couple of... whatchamacallit? Not power-ups, but achievements pop up in the corner there. So thank you so much for putting those in there.
My pleasure.
So let me ask you one other last question about this. If you are a game developer today, or if you're somebody who has an idea about wanting to develop games, would you recommend Godot?
I really would. I mean, I love it. It is so... I hesitate to say simplistic. That's not really fair, but it's a very capable engine. Here you're seeing it in a 2D game, but it also has full 3D support as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think by their own admission, and it's fully open source, devs will say it's never defeats the same feature set as say the likes of Unity and Unreal, like commercial engines that have been around for years. But does it have the features you need? Does it have the agility so you can create your games? And there's a reason that Godot is so popular with like hackathons and game jams and prototyping, because it is so quick to go. So absolutely, for anyone wanting to get into games, I would recommend it. There's a wealth of tutorials, there's a wealth of source code out there. It's Python based in terms of language, which is super easy to pick up, and it's lightweight. You can run this on a simple laptop, PC, Mac, Linux. It just works. So yeah, definitely recommend it. Give it a go. Well,
you and I have had some conversations as well. So I'm still playing around with Pico 8, and now I'm using Picotron, which is their evolution of the Pico 8 environment. And I've been going back and rewriting the very first video game I ever made when I was 12 years old, called Space Debris. Nice. And when that's finished, I'm going to go ahead and, put it out there for people to go ahead and play. But, this is the thing. If you want to get involved in making games, like as we were saying before, there's just a world of tools out of there that are free or as close to free as you could possibly imagine. And so much information out there, from YouTube tutorials to Discord to even just forums and documentation out there. Don't be afraid to go ahead and jump in, right? And enjoy the love of creation that you're then able to share with the world. And buddy, I mean, what I want to say is, you've also given your kids this incredible gift, right? It's something that lasts beyond us and beyond the work that we do on the day-to-day. And you have established memories now with your kids that they'll carry for the rest of their lives and impart on their kids, right? Like Granddad and I, we worked on this video game, and they were like, wait a minute, it was something you had to actually control with your hands back then, right? So what a joyous, wonderful thing that you've not only created for your kids and your family and yourself, but to share with all of us. So, yes, my applause to you, my friend, because it's an awesome thing to do. And I'm so thrilled that we're able to actually talk about it here on the program and share it with people.
Oh, thank you so much. And yeah, and you know what? Maybe in a few years, as they both get older, I'll even have them contributing to the code base. So they may well be even more involved if they haven't come up with their own better idea by then.
That's awesome. Quite awesome. Well, Tristan, I want to thank you so much for spending time with us today here on Rewind. And that brings us to the end of our episode. So remember, If you are a video game developer of any size, from AAA to indies, make sure you head on over to aws.amazon.com/game tech to discover the product solutions and services that we offer to help you on your cloud game development journey. And if you're a beginner looking for a clear starting point to help you build a career or learn to produce games in the AWS cloud, we recommend you start with an AWS learning plan. This set of on-demand courses will increase your knowledge of game servers and game analytics and help grow your technical skills to solve real-world game development, compute, and analytics problems. And you can demonstrate your knowledge to the world by earning digital badges. Head on over to aws.training/gametech to start your AWS for Games learning plan today. And of course, I want to give a special shout out and thank you to Waterflame for allowing us to use his music here on Rewind. Make sure you head on over to his YouTube channel at Waterflame Music to check out his incredible work. And finally, if you care about preserving the history of video games as much as I do, make sure you head on over to the Video Game History Foundation's website at gamehistory.org. They're doing incredible work to preserve the history of our industry for future generations. And I want to thank Tristan for spending time with us this afternoon and sharing the game that he made with his kids. I want to thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with me and us over here. Have a wonderful rest of your day, an awesome weekend, and we'll see you next week on Rewind.